Okay, this is Fortnite SP-L. A lot of reviews online, but there's no real guides on how to take restrictions out of it or anything as such. And there's not been a review outside of America as far as I know. In America they got very good performance out of them, around 70-75 feet per second. Australia seems to have been treated a little bit differently for that. I think our toy laws are a bit more strict. But this is particularly interesting, this one. So everyone knows already what this is, how it works. Top load 3 darts. And it should be common knowledge that using the barrel attachment is not going to help you out in any way whatsoever. It honestly just looks a bit silly. The only reason you'd use it is to cover up, say, a brass barrel, which I may be doing in the future. But yeah, that's like, straight away it's pretty average. This one shoots better than my first one actually, but yeah, they test about mid-low 40 feet per second. So we're going to have a look at how to get a little bit of an improvement out of it. Okay, so if you're an Australian, Bunnings Warehouse sells this screwdriver kit. Not too expensive, and I found it's actually fantastic. It's got really small size 0s and size 1s, and they're small enough to fit in most blasters. I found for most screws, the size 1 is the one you want. So you're going to take off screws from the slide first. It's always a good idea to have a cup or something to hold your screws so you don't lose them. The 2 in your fake red dot sight. You can lift that off. Okay, that's interesting. So it usually has... I put a screw in here, personally. Just a bit of extra strength, but it doesn't have one from the factory. So there's an improvement you can make straight away. Screw here. I'm just going to go ahead and take this out, and I'll be back in a second. Right, so remove your handle, move this piece, and it should just pry apart nicely. This is our internals. The 3 dart mag has a very large pusher on it, and a lot of wasted space down the bottom. So take that as you will. I feel it as an opportunity to get a little bit of extra capacity out of these. And then here we have the trigger mechanism, which we're going to be having a look at. This piece here, I personally have found that it makes the trigger feel very weird and feels like you're bending and breaking plastic. I really don't like it. So I'm going to pull this out and have a look. So this looks a bit scary, but really it's simple. It's super simple. Got a pull clip here, pull clip there. Okay. Try and be as careful as I can pulling this out so we don't launch shit everywhere. This is very finicky. Pulls up. You go? Mm-hmm. I'm having a bit of trouble with this bit here. It's a little bit stubborn. Okay, we're apart now. You pull the 2 halves apart. You got this, it's part of the lock that stops you from repriming or pulling the trigger or anything such. Completely unneeded. You don't need anything in here except for this piece and this piece. The others you can just straight out get rid of. Now, this is an interesting design that uses just flexing plastic as your trigger spring. So, as you can see, just bends those around rather than having an actual spring. So that's all you need. Place them in, so inside of each other. That the right way around, preferably. It's being a bastard. Okay, and click that back together. Okay, and to fix this thing, this is what makes it feel like you're bending the trigger and breaking it. I just cut it. Where'd my cutters go to? It's as simple as just done. Okay, that's a trigger fix. Now we've got another lock down here. Just try that out. This is a piece you need to keep. All the insides. And say goodbye. Not needed. Now we can reinstall that trigger there. And that's how you delete the locks. You can reassemble from there, but this can go further. Okay, let's have a look at the plunger tube. So everyone's commented about this really weird spring, and I've personally noticed this whole area is completely wasted. So let's have a look at why that spring is like that. It's got the little clips that hold the back of the plunger on. Quite easy to get off. And we'll just push out this plunger head. So the spring sits inside of there, but I've also found that a retaliator style spring can actually fit it rather well, depending on the specification of the spring itself. Another thing that's worth noting, if we put this back in, so the seal test, put your thumb over the end, you press it, it's going nowhere. Even at the back of the tube, it's going absolutely nowhere. It's got a really nice seal straight out of the factory, which is where those really nice chrono readings are coming out of America, because it's a rather nice seal in that plunger tube, despite being a very small plunger tube. So you can go ahead and you can test out springs that you have. A standard retaliator spring works. This might be an American retaliator spring or a 2x spring. I'm not entirely sure. It was just a random one I found, and it just so happened to work. So you can put that in, and it fits in, and it primes perfectly fine. But the only thing you have to consider is how far the spring can compress back, because it needs a very, very small spring. I tried a Turf 6 kilo, it didn't work. I've got multiple 10 kilo springs that didn't work because they didn't compress enough. So it's really a trial and error what spring you can use, but there are a lot more opportunities than just this tiny little thing on the end here. Next thing you can do obviously is to put some Teflon tape around this seal just to get it to seal a bit better when it seats here. And that's like your primary improvements to make to your seals. Next up, we have our AR. And it was crony tested before and after. You see about 5, 6, 7 feet per second. A notable improvement in performance from taking this out. And I didn't have a drill on hand the first time I did it. I literally just got violent jamming a screwdriver through it, and funny enough, the AR is very brittle, and this is actually one of the stronger breaches that I've worked with. It's actually quite thick and not all that brittle. So I was able to literally smash it out from the back, and a bit of pliers action, but it's definitely recommended to get a 1/2" drill bit or similar. So it was on. I'm going to try to Dremel out the spring stands for the AR. I did just do that with I think a pair of pliers or a screwdriver. I literally had no special tools the first time around I did this. We're going to just pry out the spring in the most barbaric way possible. Let's clean that up a bit and let's go and pull that spring out. Come here. There we go. That's our AR spring. And literally I just did this, which I can't guarantee it's not going to damage your blaster if you do it that way. It's definitely recommended to use a drill, but it's entirely possible to just hold on firmly on concrete and just like, definitely not on glass, you'll smash a glass. What are you doing, kitty cat? Something broke. Some pieces coming out the back there. As you can see, I've got a clear shot straight through that bolt, and that's all that matters. This is what's left of the AR. Violence was the answer, but I cannot recommend it. Definitely if you have the appropriate tools available, like say the Dremel that I had right next to me, or a drill with like a 1/2" bit or somewhere near that sort of size, would definitely be a good idea. So I'm just going to lap some Teflon tape around where the O-ring sits, just to help make it seal a little bit tighter. Drag that O-ring back over the top. That'll see us with a bit better seal to the plunger tube. Okay, so you're going to line this up. This goes onto your slide. Oh god, get on there. Okay, you get your plunger tube. You have that facing down. It will have a bit of resistance if you've done the Teflon tape. You line it up here. You get your spring support. And we get our trigger mac. You put your trigger into the hole there. You line up these pins with these holes. It also lines up with the that lock that we took the internals out. It also sits on there. Okay, and then we can pretty much put it all back together. Alrighty, the screw hole that didn't have anything in it when we first opened it, I've stolen one of the screws that hold this in, because it's already got these two. You don't need those ones. It's okay. Now we can put this back over the top. Still has some of the screws it started with. Didn't pull them all out of the case when I disassembled it. Just put them all back together as so. The only thing worth noting, you do all your holes, but this one here, my mistake was the first time, I thought that was a bolt hole. That's where the lock came from. That little grey lock we pulled out is no longer there. Alright, we're back together, all the screws in. The two longer screws you'll put here and here, That's where, at least where I prefer to put them. And I've put the standard spring back in just for now, since my other Fortnite blaster has that spring in it. This is the stock spring, so oh, that's limp. Very light. This is the same mods, it's just had some cosmetic changes, which I might make a video on later. Shaved off a bunch of things. The trigger feels normal now, unlike the really bendy trigger. You can deprime it without having to fire. Prime it again to check for jams and such without having to press a button. And it hits notably harder, even just with this, like, feels like maybe a 3 kilo, 4 kilo spring. Okay, so that'll be all for today. So I've covered the lock removal, AR removal, we've looked at the seal on the plunger, it's quite good. We've found that you don't need to have that tapered spring, even though there's a 4.5 kilo spring someone made. You can look around and see if something fits out of your spring collection. The retaliator stuff seems to work depending on how much it can compress. Later on we're going to do a video on cosmetic changes to this, and I will be attempting to increase its capacity to possibly 4 darts, and possibly something with brass, more spring findings and such. So stay tuned for later updates.